So Socrates famously once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." It's been my philosophy, riffing off of Socrates, that the unrecorded talk is not worth giving. So that's why I switched it over to my laptop. So I'm going to talk today together with Ted about the impact of the work that we've done over the past 20 years since I came here in 2003, and a little before then, because I had other colleagues who were here doing this work before me, on distributed real-time and embedded systems. Now, there's a famous quote also by Don Henley, a little bit different from Socrates, who once said during the Hell Freezes Over tour of the Eagles in the mid-90s, the song he was about to play took him 42 years to write and about 4 minutes to sing. What I'm going to be talking about today is work that took around 20 years to write together with my colleagues, so I'm going to do this in about half the time. So what are distributed real-time embedded systems? These are mission-critical systems where the right answer delivered too late becomes the wrong answer. And there's lots of examples of systems we've worked on that have transitioned into practice, things like theater-level ballistic missile defense, time-critical targeting, various types of low Earth orbit satellites, healthcare, automotive, but perhaps my favorite example of a mission-critical distributed real-time embedded systems was one we worked with a company in Germany called Krones, which built beer bottling quality assurance systems. What could be more mission-critical than getting high-quality beer to the German market? That's important. So what we've done in the past several decades, focusing primarily from the 2002-2003 timeframe when I showed up and Professor Gokley showed up till about 2013 when we shifted to other things, was focused on middleware and modeling tools for this area. And we spent a lot of time, which we'll talk about in a second, building middleware. Middleware is software that sits between the underlying operating systems and protocol stacks, but below the applications, that handles many aspects of building and deploying and assuring these distributed real-time embedded mission-critical systems. We've done a lot of really neat work there. We also spent a lot of time formalizing design expertise in the form of software patterns, which has had a big impact for a lot of different reasons in other domains. We also spent some time as a result of going to DARPA, where I worked with Janos originally, on so-called aspect-oriented development, figuring out ways to have multiple faceted techniques for optimizing the performance of our middleware and applications. And of course, since this is ISIS, we also had to do some work on modeling. And to riff off of what Jonathan was just talking about, I remember one time hearing the great phrase, "I'd rather write code that writes code than write code." So that's kind of the philosophy there. So we built a lot of neat modeling tools and did a lot of fun stuff. And this, of course, was together with Professor Andy Gokley and Professor Jules White, who was just a grad student at that time, but has gone on to do lots of other stuff. In terms of impact, so there's lots of different ways to measure impact. One way, of course, is things that are important in a bibliometric sense for academics, deans and chairs, like this kind of stuff. So we wrote a lot of papers in this time. We wrote about 180 papers in that 10-year window and have about 20,000 citations to that work. Some of those publications are very widely cited, thousands and thousands of citations to some of the work that came out in that time frame, which is great. Also important, as people mentioned, Sandeep mentioned this before, graduate students, both at the PhD level and master students, very important. A lot of these folks have gone on to do many great things at other places, some in academia, some in industry, some in government. We were also fortunate to get a fair amount of funding during that time frame from many different types of sponsors, including all the usual government sponsors, but also the defense industry base, and also the commercial world. And I think that's something to remark on more generally about ISIS. We've been extremely fortunate and successful at getting a lot of people to recognize the importance of what we do and invest in our growth. Speaking about things that we built along the way, we built millions and millions of lines of middleware, very popular middleware frameworks and toolkits like ACE and the ACE Orb or DAO, and the component integrated ACE Orb or CIAO. And these technologies, the open source releases we put out, has had a major impact on production systems, which I'll mention briefly in a second. Also on research, a lot of people did research based on this, and of course education, which is very important to all of us here. Thousands of companies adopted what we did in almost every interesting domain: air traffic management, financial services, telecom, datacom, and so on. And we were also fortunate to spin out quite a large number of companies, either people that we teamed with or spun out from what we were doing, that built a nice industry over the past 30 years in this space, showing that people doing academic research can have a real translational impact on the real world. So, looking ahead, we are excited to replicate our success in brave new worlds like generative AI, and hopefully we'll get a chance when we do the 50th anniversary of ISIS to talk more about all the success we've had in those areas going forward.